A federal judge has dealt a serious blow to Trump's plan to meddle in the 2026 midterms in November by ruling that Trump cannot force election officials to set Election Day as the deadline to receive mail in votes, as declared in his March executive order. States count absentee or mail in votes received after Election Day if they are postmarked by Election Day, and the ruling affirms their ability to do so. Now, there's a couple of angles and aspects of this that I want to talk about just briefly, but it says in the next paragraph, President Trump cares deeply about the integrity of our elections, and his executive order takes lawful actions to ensure election security. Really? I mean, that is a funny joke. It's making me laugh really hard. This is from the White House spokesman, of course. This is not the final say on the matter, and the administration expects ultimate victory on the issue. Okay, well, we'll see about that. Let me just read what we have, and then I want to make a couple of comments on it. The ruling is significant as it hampers Trump's efforts to alter the running of elections in America. Meanwhile, it also shows that courts have the ability to block his use of executive orders, limiting his power, which is great news. And I have to say that so far in the last year, his first year of his second term, the courts, the lower level federal courts, meaning lower than the Supreme Court, and the appellate courts have really, really done a great job at stopping him, or at least slowing him down, putting the brakes on his worst impulses. And I can only imagine what it would be like if he had been able to appoint even more judges in his first term. We'd be looking at a whole different game here. So thankfully, these judges have shown some courage and stood up to this guy and, ruled for the rule of law. And that's awesome news. I really worry what's going to happen after he appoints a few more judges, though, because, none of them are going to go against him on anything. All right, a little background. Washington and Oregon filed a lawsuit in April arguing that the executive order violated the U.S. Constitution, which of course it does. Chun, not sure how he says his name, a Seattle judge who was appointed by former President Joe Biden, wrote in a 75-page ruling that Trump did not have the authority to apply the changes in the states his order covered because of separation of powers. He said the order exceeded the president's authority, and of course it does, because guess what? The Constitution gives to Congress alone the authority to have any say over federal elections. The president has no say in the Constitution. But this guy is going to say the only reason the judge ruled that way is because he was appointed by Biden and therefore is biased. And I would like to just make a little argument against that. If you say any ruling a Democrat judge or judge appointed by a Democrat makes against a Republican must be thrown out because on its face it's biased. You don't even have to look at the reasoning of the case or anything. You just know anytime a judge appointed by a Democrat rules against a Republican, it's because he was biased, so the ruling can be thrown out. That's what they're literally going to argue that before the Supreme Court soon. That means any ruling made by a judge appointed by Trump in Trump's favor must also be thrown out. It would mean that. That's the logical conclusion. So if they want to have this argument that any judge, appointed by Obama or Biden or Clinton or whoever that goes against Trump has to be thrown out on its face, then any order issued by a Trump-appointed judge that favors Trump or favors Republicans must also be thrown out because it's biased on its face. Anyway, they show more about how they think than how the other side thinks. They naturally think that a judge appointed by Republicans will always and should always rule in favor of Republicans and against Democrats, no matter what the law says. That's what they believe. You know why? Because that's the dictatorial mindset. That's the dictatorial mindset. Now, look at this. This Abigail Jackson, spokesperson for the Trump White House, says that he cares deeply about the integrity of our elections, and his executive order takes lawful actions to ensure election security. Really? This is not the final say on the matter. Okay. Now, let me ask you, if he cares deeply about the integrity and the fairness of these elections, why would he sign an executive order that forbids states from counting absentee or mail-in votes that are received after election day but were postmarked by election day? You know, they can be postmarked a couple of days, a few days before election day and still not get there by election day. So who in the world would think it's unfair to not or think it's yeah, to think it's unfair to count a ballot received after election day if it was postmarked before election day or by election day? By that reasoning, the IRS has to overturn decades of tax returns. They got to start charging all kinds of penalties on people, thousands and millions of dollars per person for filing late because millions of people every year file at 11:59 p.m. on April 15th or whatever the, next, if that's on the weekend, on the following Monday. So people file, they mail their tax returns in. I don't know what they do now, if they even accept mail-in tax returns anymore. When I do it, my accountant always says it's electronic now, so which is fine with me. But if you back in the mail-in days, and I assume you can still mail in your tax return, uh, if you had until 11:59 p.m. the night of the day that taxes were due to have your letter postmarked. And if the post office put on that postmark, that's proof that you had it in by the deadline. So if we're not going to count it that way anymore, then the government's got to go after pretty much every American for probably millions of dollars a piece. You know how penalties and interest add up so quickly, right? Well, this is going to add up to millions of dollars per person. If Trump had his way on this, we'd have to go back to the IRS and change that too. Why, if it's good enough for the IRS, why is it not good enough for voting? Because it makes sense and it's done that way because it's fair. It's fair. Everybody has the exact same deadline. You go vote in person, it's say whatever the date is, November 4th. So you vote by November 4th in person, your vote counts. You mail your ballot by November 4th, it's postmarked November 4th or earlier, then your ballot should count, even if it's received days or a week or two later. However long it takes to be able to get it there. I mean, they got to have some cutoff at some point, obviously, but it can't be the day of the election because it's only fair that everyone has up until the day of the election to get their ballot in, right? That's right. So let's look at the judge's ruling just to see how unconstitutional this is and to see how biased the judge is. Let's actually read a little bit about his reasoning, shall we? I mean, we should do that, right? We can't just say he's biased because he was appointed by Biden, so we don't even have to read his ruling. Let's read his ruling and judge on the basis of that. All right. So he wrote in his ruling, he said, the Constitution assigns the states all authority to regulate the time, the place, and the manner of elections, subject only to the limitations by the president? No, subject only to the limitations by Congress. As the Constitution assigns no authority to the president whatsoever over federal election administration, the president's authority to promulgate a national ballot receipt deadline cannot stem from the Constitution. All right. So, I mean, what are they going to do? Go into the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court justices are going to say, yeah, well, that's true. The Constitution does say that only Congress has the right to do that. But this judge obviously said that because he's biased against Trump because he was appointed by Biden. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And it shows you two things: how authoritarian, how dictatorial these people want to be. He literally wants to dictate to the states how, what, and when to run elections, even though there's no constitutional authority for him to do so. And all the MAGA people, all those big Constitution supporters, all those big strict constructionists who wanted conservative judges appointed who would strictly construct the Constitution and interpret it, they're like, oh, it's okay. No, the guy was biased. He was appointed by Biden. That's all we need to know. That's all we need to know. We don't even have to read a paragraph of reasoning from the judge to know he was biased. Okay, well, at least read a paragraph from the Constitution related to elections. Like, know what you're talking about. Well, that's it for me. I appreciate you watching. Thanks for stopping by. And like and subscribe if you liked and would like to subscribe. I'd love to have you on board. And I will talk to you soon. Take care.